그 애니메이션 게임 마신 PC-FX.
The game is FX.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Esoterica and a continuing series on the NEC PC-FX, and today we're taking a look at Boundary Gate. It's a really good 3D pseudo dungeon crawler, and it's one of about 10 RPGs on the console that don't have some sort of dating sim angle to them. Before we get too far involved, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like, subscribe, and that notification bell definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, we have a Patreon link in the description below as well. Now, Boundary Gate might not be the most impressive game ever made, especially for the PC-FX, but I really do genuinely enjoy playing it, and with walkthroughs you can complete the game, and I have done this once many years ago. But right off the top, it's a very interesting setup as to how this game is actually structured, because it is from a 3D perspective. Now obviously this is not drawing polygons, the PC-FX cannot do that without an add-on that was never released, but it gives you a really nice pseudo 3D effect, and all of the sprite work is relatively of high resolution, so it does hold up and it does give you a nice sense of scale and place. So as far as 3D games on the PC-FX are concerned, it's pretty much going to be Boundary Gate as to what you have. But I love this because it has the same sense as those old turn-based dungeon crawling RPGs that I played a ton of on DOS back in the day, and it's got some Phantasy Star vibes to it as well, some of the original games. But I just enjoy this not only from the technical aspect, but it also is a really good role-playing game with a walkthrough. Of course, there's going to be a massive language barrier unless you read Japanese or speak it. You can use Google Translate on your phone. The kanji that appears is clear enough to be able to be translated. It definitely slows the game down a lot, but at least we have that, because when I beat this game like 14 years ago for the first time, nothing like that existed. I was reading story descriptions from walkthroughs that I found online. But I just love all the settings of this. We start off in this town, and as we get further into the game, you're going to start going into deeper and deeper dungeons that have a really nice look to them. It's a slow game, but I appreciate that, and that's what I want from these old school 90s RPGs. I want things to take time. I want to be able to sit down for 2 hours, grind it out, get through one thing, save, and then maybe come back a week later and pick up where I finished. The one thing that can be confusing about the game is navigating the world, especially in this town here. Everything looks sort of similar, so in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, when you're in the actual game world, you do have that map that allows you to navigate around. Then you might want to have a piece of paper and pen next to you to keep notes. It's one of those games where making your own maps is kind of essential in a way. And if you grew up in the 90s and were doing that when you were playing games, it's going to feel very natural. If you've never done it before, it's going to be a really strange thing to think to yourself. You're going to keep a notepad to pen next to you to make your own maps as you play. But progressing in the game isn't that hard, especially with the walkthrough. You basically need to trigger a few different lines of dialogue before you can get the second member of your party in, and then from there you're going to be able to engage in combat and move the story forward. But there's a lot of weird things going on in the world of Boundary Gate. There's a lot of really interesting visuals, so in a moment you're going to go into a building with me and you're going to see what's going on, and it's going to be very interesting and unique. A lot of the ways that this game scales those sprites and backgrounds feels very 3DO-esque to me. A game called Killing Time does the same sort of thing. But what's going on in this room? We have this robed figure, we have this scientific equipment, and if you're following along with the story with that walkthrough, it is quite interesting. I don't want to spoil it for the few people that may want to play this, but the story in Boundary Gate, what you can translate and what you can understand, is pretty interesting. But visually it's got a nice storytelling flair as well that I can't get over. The one thing is you can hit the wrong button and go into the menu all the time. You just need to train yourself to leave the number 2 button, or B in this instance, alone completely. But as we come around this corner here, we're finally going to get back into the tavern, or actually we're going to be buying some weapons. There is a weapons vendor as well that we can purchase from. But I love the soundtrack. It's kind of casual and fantasy feeling, so listen for about 35-45 seconds, and I'll come back and we'll talk more about the combat, because the game does have some great turn-based combat. But enjoy! So now that we have the first party member in our party, we can actually engage in some combat. And like I said, I love the soundtrack. It's got that nice fantasy vibe to it. But all of a sudden, this giant, what looks like to be an ogre, just materializes in the world, and we're able to engage in combat. And this is your standard turn-based RPG combat, which is to say, if you're into that sort of mechanic, you're going to really enjoy it. If you don't like turn-based combat, you're not going to enjoy it. Most RPGs when I was growing up were turn-based, so it definitely feels fun to me. You can set your attacks up, and there are menu translations as well online, so you can see what each individual item does for you. But of course, this is just the first boss, and it's not even a boss, it's really just an enemy. It's very easy to beat, but I love the art when you look at the defeated enemies. It's going to transition to this pile of goo and bones on the ground. That is just spectacular. But as fun as the daytime theme was, go ahead and listen to the music at night for 30 seconds. I want you to hear it, and I'll come back and tell you more about why Boundary Gate's a unique and interesting RPG. Yeah, that's just some legitimate good and slightly spooky sounding music. It actually reminds me of Dead of the Brain on the PC Engine, the X68000, pretty much every Japanese computer ever made. I'm not sure if the same composers worked on it, but it has those vibes to me. As we go through this large gate that's only open at night, we're going to be introduced to a new character, and then we have to fight this hulking bulbous monster. Kind of looks like it has boils oozing from its body, and it's a really nice looking character design. Now I will say that it lacks frames of animation, and pretty much all the combat segments are maybe like 2 to 3 frames in total. It seems like the developers used most of their energy on making that pseudo 3D world, and I'm okay with that because even back in the 90s with these turn-based RPGs, not every single character had a ton of animation frames, but some of the special things you have, like increasing your life, those do have more frames of animation. But this is kind of the cadence of Boundary Gate. Explore around, find party members, buy items, and then encounter an enemy that you need to fight. Later on in the game, you're going to start getting into dungeons, and then you need to kind of circumnavigate them, figure out how to get to the end of the dungeon, beat the boss, and get out with the items you need. And in that respect, it is a classic formula. Turn-based, dungeon crawling, JRPG. If you like it, you're really going to like Boundary Gate. And I do like how that sprite just basically dissolves. The PC-FX had a lot of interesting transformation hardware as far as the effects they could do, and Boundary Gate does utilize a lot of them. And of course, because it is a PC-FX game, we're going to basically be getting real-time dialogue the entire time. Pretty much every main character you're going to encounter is 100% voiced. So the question is, do I recommend Boundary Gate? If you have a PC-FX and you've never played it, I 100% recommend it. It's one of the better RPGs on the console that does not have dating sim elements to it, because unfortunately, a lot of the best RPGs on the console do have dating sim elements as well, and that just does not in any way, shape, or form do it for me. If you don't own a PC-FX and you want to emulate a really obscure and rare JRPG, it works perfect in bed defend, and I definitely recommend it as well. Would I buy a PC-FX to play Boundary Gate? No, I would not. But you can still pick the game up for like $100, so it's not that bad of a deal. And after this, we get to go to the inn, sleep, and it'll be morning and we can continue our quest. But that's Boundary Gate. It's a really unique and interesting JRPG on the PC-FX, and I do recommend it if you're into obscure RPG games. Sure that we'll have more PC-FX content coming soon. Hit like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.